Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hayek podcast. We had an issue with the technical stuff now, but you probably won't see this in the recording. But in any case, we're here with our guests, Mark Hanshaw and President Paul Stumb from Cumberland University. We are going through the inauguration of Hayek Global College this week, and we have a 2+2 partnership with Cumberland University, which we're very excited. And I'm happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Edson. It's our privilege to be here with you.
Yeah, we're very much enjoying our visit. And I might say we were very happy to have you on our campus not too long ago.
Great. So can we put the Cumberland logo on the screen? Tell us about the history of Cumberland University. You have a very rich history, right?
We do indeed have a rich history and heritage. The university was founded actually by the Cumberland Presbyterian Church originally in 1842, 182 years ago this year. We're beginning next week our 183rd academic year at Cumberland. And it's difficult to consolidate that down into any reasonable period of time. Mark and I could talk for hours about the history of our institution. And in fact, there have been several books written about the history of Cumberland University because we went through, we were 20 years before the Civil War in the United States. We were founded 100 years before World War II. And now, like I say, we're celebrating our 183rd academic year. And it's just, we can tell stories for a long time. But I think one of the things that probably characterizes our history the best is to note who some of our notable alums are. Mark, share with Edson some of our most notable alums.
Sure. Well, it's quite a list. And, as President Stumb said, our institution really was, when it was first founded, was founded as an institution that was intended to prepare future leaders. It was one of the largest and most prestigious institutions when it was founded west of the Appalachian Mountains in the United States. And of course, at that time, the United States was still taking shape. And so we have the western frontier moving across the Appalachian Mountains and across the continental U.S. And Cumberland University was very much a part of the fabric of that movement in training leaders. And we could go through a laundry list of who some of those leaders are, but we have amongst our graduates a former Nobel laureate. That individual, Cordell Hull, was also, interestingly enough, the individual that's credited as being sort of the founder, at least on the United States side, with the United Nations. So an individual who really played a very important historical role.
Cordell Hull served as the U.S. Secretary of State during the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration, and actually he's the longest ever U.S. serving Secretary of State. He served for 12 years under Roosevelt and then under Truman.
Amazing.
Right.
And as I said before, for us in Brazil, having an institution like yours who has a Nobel Prize is amazing, because for the whole country, we don't have a Nobel Prize yet. So
not yet, but you will someday. Maybe from Hayek.
Yeah, right.
That's
Especially
right.
with a partnership like Cumberland.
That's right.
Absolutely.
You could get your first, and we could get our second if we have a graduate that comes through our 2+2 program.
All right. That's a
right.
great goal.
And that's our plan.
Oh, yes.
But in addition to Cordell Hull, we count among our graduates 2 U.S. Supreme Court justices, more than 80 members of the United States Congress, 21 governors, 7 of whom have served the great state of Tennessee, where we are, just east of Nashville.
And a dozen federal judges. So a really important and significant footprint.
That's very impressive. And tell me about the logo. So is that a building that is in the campus, or what is that?
This tower, which is our logo, is actually on Memorial Hall. Now, Memorial Hall was not built in 1842 when we were founded. It was built about 50 years later. It was constructed in 1896, but that's still 128 years ago now.
Right.
But that building is at the center of our campus today. We've continue to grow our campus. In fact, when that building was built, it was the only building on our campus for a while. But that building, actually, that tower in that building sits right above the offices that Mark Hanshaw and I now occupy on the first floor of Memorial Hall. So you've been in that building, and
I've been there. I've stepped into history when I went to that building.
You have indeed.
Right,
You have indeed.
right. So it's amazing. And what's the story with the ashes? Why is it like the phoenix? What's the story behind that?
Yeah. So most universities in the United States have a mascot. And I don't think that's true necessarily in other parts of the globe. But in the United States, most institutions have some mascot that symbolically represents their institution. And in the case of Cumberland University, our mascot is the phoenix. And the phoenix really harkens back to the history of Cumberland University, because Cumberland University, as I said, when it was first founded, it was the second institution of higher education founded in the state of Tennessee at a time when the U.S. was expanding its borders. It was the most important, at one point, the most important institution west of the Appalachian Mountains. Its law school, its seminary, its school of education, all of these were really, really prominent schools that were part of Cumberland University. And so it was growing on a particular trajectory toward being a very, very important institution until the American Civil War. And the American Civil War really caused immense pain in the region that our institution is located, and immense pain for the institution. And Paul, do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, I'll tell that story. I'll tell it quickly, but there is a notable story
story
about how we got the phoenix as our symbol. And by the way, the phoenix today represents all of our students, but most notably, arguably, our athletes, because our athletic teams are all Phoenix, whether the Fighting Phoenix and the Phoenix football and basketball. And I'm talking about American football. We do play soccer as well.
Of course.
And by the way, I need to not forget to tell you a story about a very famous football game involving Cumberland University in a minute, but first let me tell you how the Phoenix started.
Sure.
The Phoenix was started by one of our grads named William E. Ward, who was a graduate of the theology school at Cumberland. And he later went on to start the Ward Seminary, a seminary for women in Nashville. But William Ward, at the end of the Civil War, was walking across our campus, and he saw one of our most prominent academic buildings that had been reduced to rubble. It had been burned by the Union Army. And William Ward saw one of the white Corinthian columns that previously stood in front of that building prone on the ground, lying in front of where that building used to stand. And he took a piece of coal and wrote the Latin word resurgam on that Corinthian column. Resurgam is Latin for I will arise. And that gave birth to our symbol of the phoenix. And we actually have a picture of that old building before it burned.
Right. Wow. And we wanted to bring this to you, Edson. This is a magazine that was produced to commemorate 180 years of history of Cumberland University.
I'm going to show it here for the screen.
But that image right there in the center of that second page, that is the building that we're talking about that was razed during the Civil War. And if you think back to the American Civil War, Nashville, the area around Nashville and Wilson County, where our campus is located right next to Nashville, this was an area of intense fighting, especially toward the conclusion of the Civil War. And in Wilson County, the community itself was just overtaken by fighting. And the final major battle of the American Civil War took place in Nashville, the Battle of Nashville.
So Cumberland is a major part of U.S. history, right? Not just Tennessee, but U.S. history when you think about all those events.
It is indeed. And if you advance 80 years after the Civil War into World War II, we also played a major role in that war because we served as the training grounds for all of the soldiers that went off to fight in the European theater. And the reason for that was because of the climate and the terrain of Lebanon and Middle Tennessee, which is very similar to that in the European theater. And so we had hundreds of thousands of soldiers who trained, and they called it the maneuvers training on our campus. And prominent U.S. General George Patton, who was at one point responsible for all the training in the maneuvers, was officed in this very building, and he officed where my office is today. I say he was in my office. He probably says I was in his or am in his office, but
Right.
George Patton and I shared the same office. I'll say it that way.
Very cool. Very cool. So Cumberland rose from the ashes, and that's how you got the name Phoenix. Is that something that is embedded in the culture of Cumberland? Do you see that students are inspired by the Phoenix?
They are, and we have a tradition every year at the beginning of each academic year. We'll do this tradition next week for all of our new incoming freshmen. And by the way, this year we have our largest ever incoming freshman class with about 800 students.
Amazing.
And that class will convene for our opening convocation. And as a part of that ceremony, actually at the very end of that ceremony, we give each new student a card. One side has the alma mater on it. Most of those students will have never seen or sung our alma mater. We collectively sing it. I could do that for you right now if you'd like.
I'd love to.
Time for your serenade.
I'll spare the audience that, but it is a great little tune.
Okay, we'll do it afterwards.
We'll do it afterwards. But we sing the alma mater, and then we ask them to turn that card over, and we ask them to write on the back of that card some fear, some concern, some trepidation they have about
in their lives,
their ability to be successful in college. That's right. Not just in their life, but something that they think might prevent them from finishing their academic curriculum and graduating and staying the course. And so they write that fear or concern on that card, and then we march out of the arena where we hold our
Is that all the
convocation.
freshmen do that?
All the freshmen.
Wow.
And they take it out. We have a big fire
Do you have
pit.
videos of that?
Oh yeah, we do.
yeah,
We'll share that. But we have a big fire pit. The fire pit's probably 14 feet in diameter at the base, and it rises up about 12 feet in the air.
And
that's-
has a phoenix right above it.
it's a phoenix. And
I've seen it. Is that
it's
the one
right
I saw?
out in front of
Yes.
Memorial Hall.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
And we light it on fire, and they commit their fear or concern to the fire to be rid of that concern that might prevent them from reaching the goal
From
line
being
of graduation.
Yeah.
And do you see that as having an effect on the student?
Well, I think it's important to know something about our students, which is our students come from such a diverse range of backgrounds. And many of our students really are fighting against the odds to be able to gain a college degree. And so we have just such an incredible group of students who invest so much heart and soul in their education. And so I sort of believe that most of the students that come to Cumberland University's campus, they already have the spirit of the Phoenix embedded because they've already lived lives sometimes of great challenge just to get to this point. And so when you see the struggles they've had, when you see the things they've come through, and you see them come and succeed, and you see them graduate, or President Stumb and I were just having a conversation just yesterday about a student that I worked with who got a full ride scholarship to go to Belmont School of Law, and he's starting there just this week. And when you see individuals like that succeed in the ways that they are succeeding, it makes you really, really proud to be part of the campus, and you clearly see the spirit of the Phoenix in that academic work.
Amazing.
And I think they remember that tradition too. We've been doing that for many years now, and I think when they come back as alums, they talk about that experience.
Yeah.
So I think it is significant to them.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the psychological effect. My colleague Hannah, she's a psychologist, and she's always bringing this stuff up. Where a simple tradition like that, just simply throwing a fire with your concerns there, might have an impactful effect on how the students behave. And
Tradition is so important, and we have tried to cultivate those long-standing traditions. Another one that we have is we do an annual colloquium every year in the fall we take a day out where every student is invited to come to a series of talks and lectures and presentations. They go all day long. And a lot of those talks and presentations are done by students. They can talk on anything they want. We have talks on everything from herpetology and rattlesnakes to beekeeping to artificial intelligence to I heard Dr. Phillips do the CRISPR-Cas9 talk. I mean, it's just a wide array of topics. And we do a lot of undergraduate student research on our campus, and students spend months preparing for colloquium and the talks that they want to give. It's another great tradition.
Right. These are arising out of their own work on campus in all of these fields. And it's not just these fields in science and business, but we have students that create films, and they show the films at colloquium. So it's just a really rich tapestry of ways that students express their experience at Cumberland University.
And one other thing I want to mention, because we touched on it a minute ago, and that is, you asked about our students. We had students last year from 65 of the 95 counties across the great state of Tennessee. We had students from 38 of the 50 United States.
Wow.
And we had students from 49 countries.
Wow.
And our population's only about 3,500 students total.
Very diverse.
But it is a very diverse student body, and we love that. And that's one of the things that we're so excited about partnering with Hayek about, because we want to bring in Brazilian students. We've already had students from Brazil, and you know one of them who played on our tennis team.
Yes, I know, right? Victor is in the Brazilian tennis team. He's in the tennis team.
Yeah. But we want to open up our campus to more Brazilian students and more students from other campuses as we continue to expand our international presence. That's really important to us strategically.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I will say something about this, because this is an area of particular importance to me. Paul and I spend a lot of time talking about the work that we do aimed at enhancing and expanding our international student population on campus. But from our perspective, for our purposes, we really believe and want these to be bilateral relationships. And so we see these as relationships wherein we are lucky enough to be able to extend an opportunity to students from other parts of the globe to come and study on our campus, which we are thrilled about. But we see that as an incredible benefit to our campus, because students have the opportunity to learn from one another. Students from different parts of the globe in the same classroom, living in the same dorms, they're learning directly from one another. And then we also utilize this as a jumping off point to expand opportunities for our own students to be able to look at opportunities to study abroad as well. So the bilateral nature of these relationships is critically important to us.
Yeah, I had this experience when I was young, where when I was 18, I lived in the United States as a Brazilian student. And it was one of the most transformative experiences that I had to live abroad by myself, interact with people from many different places in the world, because that's what happened. And in a place like Cumberland, even more, right? So I'm really looking forward to having more students have the opportunity that I had when I was young in a place like Cumberland.
And you shouldn't forget to mention that during your first year there as an 18-year-old, that on the college tennis team, you went undefeated for the entire season. Right. I don't want you to omit that. That's an important fact.
Right. I'll send a hello now to my coach, Jay Webb Horton. He was a fantastic mentor at the time, and it was a good experience. Thank you for mentioning that, Paul.
I'd be proud of that. I'd want to mention that if I won a game. I think I won a set in tennis one time.
Well, Edson, I'm going to follow up on something you said, not to take us too deep down a rabbit trail, but I absolutely believe that what you said related to your experience is so profound, because I've seen students shaped by international experiences as much as almost any other experience that we can offer on campus.
Right.
And I've seen students come back from studies abroad, and literally when they step foot back on campus after having had those experiences. They're more confident. They feel
Yes.
more empowered. They see this world as their world.
Yes.
And they're no longer just citizens of Middle Tennessee, but they literally are citizens of the whole globe.
Yes.
And, I share often with our new students that, particularly those that are just coming out of high school, I'm not talking about grad students but for most of us, and I would suggest this is probably true here in Brazil, just like it is in the U.S., but for most of us, we go to high school with a whole bunch of people that kind of look like us, and they dress like us, and they smell like us,
Yes.
and they worship like us, and they talk like us,
Eat
and
the
they
same
think like
food,
us.
and- yeah.
They like the same food. They
Yeah.
like the same girls. It's
Yeah.
all, or guys, it's,
Yeah.
but when you get to arrive on a college campus like Cumberland University, where we have such diversity of backgrounds,
Yeah.
it really does open their eyes to the larger world. And
Yeah.
it's such an important part of their education, beyond just whether they're studying psychology or business or nursing or criminal justice or English or math or whatever they're studying for a degree. They're such a big part of their education is through those relationships that they'll form on campus.
Yes. And something on that is, I also mentioned, we don't realize that our own culture, what's unique about our own culture, until we go and meet other people's cultures close by, right? And we actually
Right.
relate to other people. And one story that I tell is that simple story, but it comes to tell the example. I didn't realize that chicken hearts was something unique to Brazil. And I went to eat with some colleagues in the United States at a Brazilian restaurant. And like, well, let's have some chicken hearts. It's awesome. Look, you should eat this. They're like, oh, wow, chicken hearts. Come on.
They were a little reluctant, I bet.
Yeah, they were reluctant to eat
Did you
the
get them to
chicken
try it?
Yeah, they did, but kind of reluctant. They didn't really like it. But I was very happy to eat the chicken hearts. It's been so long I didn't eat them.
I've never had a chicken heart. We might have to try that while we're here.
I've never had one either. Yeah,
Yeah,
it sounds
so-
like it's on the menu.
Yeah, so we should try them here. But
Mark Hanshaw has been to 88 countries. He's traveled all over the globe. He's been to, most, I guess you haven't been quite to every continent. You haven't been to Antarctica, have you?
I have not been to Antarctica.
Okay.
it's a bit cold there.
Yeah,
But 88 countries is nothing to
Maybe
sneeze
we'll
at.
go there to recruit students.
Yeah,
next year.
maybe so.
We have some penguins there.
Yeah, the penguins. But even he still learns from these students because you're right. They have different things in their culture that we don't appreciate or understand, and
Right.
we need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It helps us even see our own selves differently. I know Mahatma Gandhi once said that you can never understand a religious system unless and until you've fully experienced a different religious system.
Right.
And he was talking about religion, but I think it holds true for cultures in general.
Yes.
You don't see what you don't see until you're put in a position of being able to, from a different vantage point, reflect back on your own experience.
Right.
And I think it can change you profoundly in the way that you see the world.
Right.
And I got to tell you, too, we really work hard at Cumberland to try to help make every student successful. I want to give you one example that just comes to mind as you're talking about students from different locations. We had last year a young lady, year before last now, she's starting her third year with us, but 2 years ago, a young lady arrived on our campus. She's from Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
And she was a senior pharmacy student at the University of Kabul when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan and the Taliban took over the country. So
Wow.
overnight, she was not allowed to go back to school because the Taliban didn't allow women to have any education.
That must have been traumatic.
It was horribly traumatic for her, I'm sure, and she shared that story. But she managed to escape the country, and she got out of Afghanistan and somehow ended up in New York City. Now, when she arrived in New York City, she spoke 5 languages, but English was not one of them. And so she struggled not only with the new culture and being now out of school, but also with the language barriers. But she learned English. She's a very bright young lady. And she got connected with the Presbyterian Church. And the Presbyterian Church, somehow, I'm not sure exactly how this happened, but they sent her to live with a friend of mine named Sherrod Eddington. And Sherrod Eddington is the senior minister at the First Presbyterian Church in Lebanon, Tennessee.
Wow.
And so Sherrod and his wife, Courtney, who's an attorney, took her in. And they, for the first 6 months, she just was learning the English language and learning how to.
Oh, she didn't speak English.
She didn't speak English. She didn't speak any English when she in Afghanistan,
Wow.
but she did speak 5 other languages, and so she was very bright and good with language skills. But after about 6 months, she could communicate. Maybe not as well as Dr. Hanshaw, but probably better than me. And she learned the English language, and then we took her in at Cumberland, and we don't have a pharmacy program at Cumberland, so we couldn't put her in pharmacy school, but we put her in nursing school. And so she's beginning her 3rd year now. She had to start over basically in the US, but she's now starting her 3rd year of nursing school. And by the way, after her 2nd semester, she was on the dean's list, and she's been a very exceptional student. But she's also, I tell you that not just to say that, brag on her, which I certainly want to do, but to say what an impact she has had on our other students as they see and welcome her and help her be successful.
Yeah.
And that helps not only her, but it helps them as well.
Yes, definitely.
Well, and the other thing that I think that's an important footnote to that story is that so many people have been involved in making this opportunity possible for her. And I think that's an expression of the type of community that exists at Cumberland University. I mean, literally the faculty, the staff, people that aren't even on our campus that just knew about her and wanted to offer some support.
Right.
I mean, there were so many people and so many resources that came together to even make this possible. And I think that really, in many ways, kind of expresses that common bond, that common sense of purpose that you find at Cumberland University.
Right. And it's welcoming, I'm missing the word, but an international type of thing, right? It's not just a community close to your neighborhood, but you're welcoming people from many different places in the world, including Afghanistan.
Yeah. Masuda Habibi is her name. She's a wonderful young lady.
Very interesting.
I need to tell you another story, though, if we have time for that.
Please.
About, we play a game in the States called football. It doesn't involve a little round ball. It involves a pigskin ball that's kind of odd shaped.
There's little foot to it, right?
That's right. There's little foot to it. Not a lot of foot to it. Sometimes punting and kicking, but there's a lot more passing and running. But nevertheless, football is an important, football and baseball, both in the U.S., are important sports. And Cumberland University also holds the record in the United States for the biggest margin of victory ever in the history of college football.
Wow.
And that happened on October 7th, 1916, when Cumberland University went to Atlanta, Georgia, and we played the Ramblin' Wreck of Georgia Tech in football. And the final score of that game was 222-0.
Wow.
222, which
Well, give us a what's a typical score in football?
Typical score in football would be 14-7 or 21-10. I mean, it's
way out of the ranks.
Yeah, I mean, there are very few football games ever that have gotten into triple digits. There have been a few games that maybe get close to 100 points. It's what would be, I mean, 40-point game would be a blowout in football. But 222-0, nothing's ever come close to that, and we participated in that game. Now, I need to tell you that we were not on the winning end of that. We lost to Georgia Tech.
Oh, you lost?
We lost to Georgia Tech. But there's a great story behind that, because in 1916, it was the beginning of World War I, and we didn't have a football team in 1916.
Okay.
But we did have a contract to play Georgia Tech in football. And the previous spring, the spring of 1916, we played Georgia Tech in baseball in Lebanon, Tennessee, and we spanked them in baseball.
Wow.
22-0 on the baseball diamond.
All right. So
And the coach of the baseball team and the football team, back in the day, this wasn't uncommon, was the same person. It was John Heisman of Heisman Trophy fame. And John Heisman, who coached football and baseball at Georgia Tech in 1916, got his baseball team spanked in the spring. And even though we didn't have a team, he refused to let us out of the contract and made us come to Atlanta. We didn't have a team at all, so we took a group of boys that were from the men's choral group, and also the Kappa Sigma Social Fraternity, 14 of them. And they got on a train. They didn't even have uniforms. They'd never played a down, never been on a football field. But they went to Atlanta, Georgia to avoid a lawsuit, which might have been devastating to the school. And they fielded a team. They didn't score any points. In fact, they never even earned a single first down in the game. There were no earned first downs in the game by either team because every time Georgia Tech got the ball, they scored. And Cumberland never earned a first down in the game. So if you know anything about football, it was a fascinating game, and
Amazing.
we hold the record.
I wouldn't feel too bad about losing because I remembered how Brazil lost to 7-1 to Germany in the World Cup.
Oh, yeah.
You probably remember that
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
right?
that's right.
Oh, indeed.
It was
Yeah,
about
yeah.
like that. It was about like that.
Yeah. So, amongst all of the historic accomplishments of Cumberland University, that one gets a lot of attention, but it may not be the one that I think is most significant in terms of shaping the country or the community.
I love the story, though.
Awesome. So tell me, what specifically about Brazil? I know it's the first time you both come to Brazil, so this is significant. And what comes to mind when you think about Brazil? And what do you think about Brazil?
You know, when I think about Brazil, I think about Rio. I think about the beaches. I think about the beautiful people. And I think about the language. I think about the Portuguese language, which you advised me earlier today is not similar to that spoken in Portugal.
Yeah.
So
It's the same language, but it's spoken very differently.
yeah. But I think, I mean, the way I look at Brazil is a wonderful country with a lot of wonderful history and, moreover, a lot of wonderful people. And we want to be a part of that. We want to have a relationship with Brazil. And we are simultaneously, I told you we have students this year from 49 countries. And so we also are cultivating, and largely due to the work of Dr. Mark Hanshaw. I got to tell you about this guy. He's an amazing guy. I've done a lot of, let me say, I've made some good decisions and some bad decisions, I'm certain. I'm in my 10th year as president of Cumberland. But one of the best decisions
I'm
I
not
ever made.
sure which side of this coin I'm going to fall
You're on the positive. It's one of the best decisions I ever made was hiring this guy right
He's
here.
amazing, right?
He's amazingly talented. You know, he's a preacher. He's an ordained minister. He's got a law degree, so he's a lawyer, and he also has a PhD in ethics.
Wow.
And it's hard for me to
Curriculum.
sometimes understand how you can have a law degree and a PhD in ethics. Those seem to me sort of they don't work together very well. But he's really smart, and one of the things that he's really focused on is helping us expand intentionally and into international marketplaces. And so we're simultaneously talking with universities in a number of different countries about partnerships. And this one is one that we're so very excited about because it's coming to fruition, and we're anxious to have your students come to Cumberland and be a part of our family as well as this family down here.
Amazing.
and to look for opportunities for our students to be engaged with your students here. I mean,
And our faculty.
that again, going back to the real necessarily bilateral nature of these relationships when they're really healthy and strong. And so, that's certainly something that we expect and hope and anticipate will be a part of this overall relationship. But getting back to the question you asked, I'm just going to say one quick thing, which
Yeah.
is that, when you engage another country and another culture, you learn a lot. But the most important thing you learn is you learn something about the people. And you become bonded not because of the particular cultural traits necessarily of that community. You become bonded because of the people that you meet.
Right.
And I'll say with regard to Brazil, I have a very dear friend who's a professor at the University of Washington in Washington State, and he is Brazilian. And he and I have had long conversations about the history and politics of Brazil. And I feel like I've had this relationship with Brazil, even not having been here, because of those wonderful conversations through a person that to me represents and speaks about the culture of Brazil in some incredibly positive ways.
Amazing. Amazing. And what can a student expect to see when he arrives at Cumberland University? What is the student life like for international students, like Brazilian students coming in?
Well, the first thing I would say is that we have a very engaged international community. We have a director of international student services. In fact, we just hired a new lady in that job from Kent State University. She's very bright. She's a native of Hungary, where you live.
Yeah, I did live there.
And
Hungarians are awesome.
and so, yeah, maybe you can come speak Hungarian with her a little bit.
I would know like 3 words now.
Well, but they can expect to immediately be assimilated into a community of other international students, some of whom will be from their own country, but many of whom will be from countries around the globe. Mm-hmm. They can expect to find, a lot of, we have, I lost count of them. I think it's 75 different student organizations, every kind of, potential avocational interest that students might have. We've got a student club for it. I started one. I don't think it's still going anymore because I'm the only one that's interested in one particular avocation. I like to play bridge, tournament, competitive
So
bridge.
you are the only member of this organization?
I started a bridge club.
Is that the cards game?
Yeah, card game.
Okay,
Yeah, card game. Yeah. And there are a lot of good Brazilian bridge players, by the way. Oh,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's a game that and we now, since COVID, now we have international tournaments around the globe every year, but since COVID started, we can now do those virtually, and we play bridge online. And I play bridge more than I should online. My wife tells me I have too many avocations, and that's the worst one because it's just I'm addicted to it. But I can sit down and play bridge with people from all over the world in a moment's notice because there are literally hundreds of games going on simultaneously all the time. But that's just one example. But anything they're interested in, whether it's sports and athletics like tennis, and we have 31 varsity sports teams at Cumberland University. We even have an esports team now, which I didn't know what that was until recently.
That's video games, right?
It is.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the
That's
coach,
right.
the coach of our esports team, he didn't let them just sit like me and be couch potatoes and exercise their thumbs. He makes them. He was a former football player in college himself, our esports coach, and he makes them get up and run and do push-ups and sit-ups, and so he actually makes them
He exercise while they're playing video games.
Yes, because
Wow.
physical fitness is part of the stamina that allows them to be at their best in the video game. So it's his own philosophy and approach, but I think he does it very well. In fact, I will have to say our esports team has won several national championships. It's really remarkable.
We have 3 national baseball championships at Cumberland. Baseball's a great sport for us. We've had a number of other we haven't won any soccer national championships, but we did win the conference in women's soccer last year. We've had several national champions in track and in wrestling. We had a 145-pound weight class guy last year who was just he was a machine. I mean, he has 0 body fat, I think. He's just so fit, and to see this guy wrestle on the mat's incredible.
Amazing. So it's not just about the classroom experience. That's what I understand. It's so much more than just going to classes at Cumberland. There's student clubs, there's sports, and many different things.
And I would say this, for international students as well as our domestic students, one of the things that we believe having international students on campus does for us is give us a campus that is more diverse, give us a campus that is richer. But you have to be pretty intentional to help students take advantage of this.
Right.
And so we strive very hard to bring international students and domestic students together. In housing, we will often put international students and domestic students together so they have the experience of living together.
That's great.
Did you do that when you were an undergrad? Did you live with...
I lived with the tennis players, and they were from different places. So
Okay.
I lived with the French and Ecuadorian in the same.
Okay.
So, we really want to see across the whole campus, we want to see all the parts of our campus community really draw from this experience of having international students in our presence.
Very cool.
I'll tell you one other thing that I think is noteworthy. I tell all of our incoming students and their parents, we have a thing in the summer called Rising Phoenix Day. It's when the new students come in and they kind of go through an orientation, welcome to campus. And I tell them all that there are 4 reasons that you should go to college. Now, I'm not trying to sell them on Cumberland. They're already there to go to Cumberland, although I love talking about Cumberland. But I think there are 4 reasons that it's important to go to college, whether you go to Cumberland or any other college.
Right.
And in my estimation, those 4 are these 4. Number 1 is, and I use the analogy of the state fair, the Tennessee State Fair, our state, is held in Lebanon, Tennessee. That's where the state fair is every year. And I told you I have 8 grandchildren. And my grandchildren, and probably your son and daughter like this too, they like the area of the fair called the Midway, where all the rides are, the roller coasters and
Right.
the Ferris wheel and the bumper cars and all that stuff. They love that. But over in that section,
And in fact, there's a Midway right outside of our hotel.
there's a big Ferris wheel. Yeah.
There is indeed.
Nice.
But the in front of many of those rides, particularly those rides that my grandson Harrison wants to get on, there's a wooden man that has his arm outstretched like this, and he has a sign on his chest. Do you know what I'm talking about? He has his arm outstretched, and the sign says, "You must be this tall to get on this ride."
Right. Yeah.
And my grandson Harrison's not quite tall enough yet to get on a lot of rides. But the point of that is that, in my estimation, today, if you don't have an earned college degree, you're not tall enough to get on a whole bunch of employment rides. There are a whole bunch of employers that won't hire you today if you don't have an earned college degree. And in fact, some of that's legislated. I use the example of a former classmate of mine. I went to high school with a guy who didn't go to college. He didn't want to go to college. And college is not for everybody, but for a lot of people it is today. He chose to go into real estate, and he became a real estate appraiser. And that's his vocation. And he's had a great vocation, appraising real estate. In the U.S., at least, if you buy any piece of property, you have to have it appraised so that the bank will make you a loan. Unless you're a cash buyer, you don't have to have it appraised. But most people that are buying their first house, they got to get a loan. And to do that, you have to have an appraisal. In the state of Tennessee, and I believe this is true in all 50 states in the U.S. today, you can't be a real estate appraiser without a college degree. You can't get a license to be a real estate appraiser. And that's the case for a whole bunch of other jobs. So that's number 1. You got to be tall enough educationally to get on a whole bunch of employment rights. Number 2 is your expected earnings. And I would argue, and there have been a lot of case studies to demonstrate this, that the average earnings of those with a earned baccalaureate degree today in the U.S., it's about $25,000 a year more than those without an earned college degree. So that would be
Multiply that for years in your lifetime, and it's how much money you're talking about.
That's right. Over the course of a 40-year career, which most of us work about 40 years or more, I'm already past that.
Right.
After you graduate from college, 40 times $25,000, you don't have to be a math major to do that. That's $1 million. So on average, those with a college degree earn more than $1 million more than those without. That's reason number 2. Reason number 3 is just what we were talking about. It's the people you meet. And in fact, most people, I would argue, meet lifelong friends and maybe even their lifelong spouse or partner in college. A lot of people do. And I tell the parents when we have these sessions, I tell them to look around the room. I say, look to your left and right and behind you, and maybe there's a future in-law that's sitting right there with you, somebody that your child will someday be married to.
Right.
And by the way, wouldn't it be okay if your future son-in-law or daughter-in-law or your future spouse also earned $1 million more over the course of his or her career?
Of course.
That's not all bad, right? That's 5 million real here in Brazil, right?
Yes.
Roughly right.
Yeah, it's times 5.
Yeah.
That's right.
A lot
And
more
then
money.
the 4th reason I say that I think it's important to go to college is that you might actually learn something worthwhile. You know?
Right.
And in some
Right.
disciplines, if you're going to be a nurse, then you're going to learn something about how to draw blood and give shots and do nursing stuff. If you're going to be an accountant like your wife, then you're going to learn the difference between a debit and a credit, and learn how to do a balance sheet and a P&L. I mean,
Right.
you learn practical stuff in school too. So that's the 4th, but I think probably the least significant reason.
And that's I love how you say that, because people only think about this 4th reason, and they reason behind all the decisions that are making about going to college or not on this 4th reason. But there's so much more that goes into the college experience, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm gonna get at a 5th one of doing it internationally. Right. It's totally different than doing it nationally, and
Without a
doing
doubt.
it in English too. At a place like Cumberland in the United States is a completely different experience than it would be if people were doing it in Brazil.
it will open up entirely different opportunities for the students who take advantage of this kind of educational path.
Right.
Opportunities they would not otherwise have any way of opening up for themselves.
Right. And it's not just because of United States, but
Right.
also because the entire world speaks English as a second language, right?
Well, I mean, you know, I did a master's degree at the University of Manchester, and when I was there, there were
Do
27.
they speak English over there?
I don't know. I think
different
they
type of
say
English, right?
they say they speak the Queen's English. I'm not totally convinced, but nonetheless, there were 27 students in my class, in my cohort, and out of those 27 students, 2 were from the UK. I was the only one from the US. Otherwise, they were from literally every other part of the globe. And that was an incredibly rich experience. And that was not an experience I could have had almost any place other than in that program, in that place. And so when you find these opportunities, it's so important that students take advantage of them.
Right.
I do need to challenge you on that, though. You said literally every other part of the globe. Anybody from Antarctica there?
I said almost every other part.
almost.
It's not literally. Right. And what advice would you give to young people who are going to college now? Think back, like all the years of experience that you have now, and now think again that if you were 18, what advice would you give to yourself right now?
The first piece of advice I would give them is, there's an old expression that says, anything worth having is worth working hard for. And I think the advice I would give them is stay to the goal line. I mean, don't drop out of school. It's tempting. I mean, college is hard.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to work hard. You have to study hard. You have to apply yourself. And it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to get distracted by girls or computer games or sports or work or life. But once you earn a college degree, it's something that can never be taken away from you. And so I think that the important thing that I tell all incoming students is stay the course, make it to the goal line.
Right.
Yeah, and one thing I would say, there's a lot of discussion. I don't know if this is happening in Brazil or not, but there's a lot of discussion in the U.S. about whether or not a college degree is worth the price tag that's associated with it. And, you know, I just have to underscore something that Paul just said there, which is that, you know, you could spend a certain amount on a car that will last you 5 years and then will have to be replaced. Or you could spend the same amount on a college education and have something that supports you and increases your earning capacity and gives you different and new and better opportunities for your whole life. And then you have to ask yourself, which is the better investment?
There's another expression that I like that you just reminded me of, and the expression is, the only thing rising faster than the cost of a college education is the cost of not having a college education.
That's a great way to say it. Yes. And any final remarks for people who are listening to us now? Any question I should have asked?
You know, I would just leave this one thought. There's an old expression that I've long liked. It's an Indian expression, not a Indian, it's an American Indian expression. But I think it's important to take everything. We talked about the importance of people earlier.
Yeah.
And the expression goes like this. It says, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. You should endeavor to live your life in such a manner that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. And I think that everything in life is about trying to live your life in a meaningful way that makes a difference and helps other people. And I really believe that's what we do. It's what motivates me to get up every morning and go to work at Cumberland University. I believe we're transforming lives through the power of education, but we're enabling people to go out and do good in the world and help other people. And so that's my last thought.
We're making the world a better place, one student at a time.
That's right. I love that. Did you just make that up?
It's a quote I had in the back of my mind, but it ties into what you said.
It is. That's good.
And I think we're helping those students themselves
Right.
really have the opportunity to do things they would not otherwise be able to do throughout their careers. And that's an invaluable gift.
Right. Well, Mark, Paul, it was an honor having you today. Thank you so much for our conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.